Welcome to the first edition of Global Innovation. I'm your host, Chris Graham. Innovation drives progress in the arts and sciences. It leads to medical breakthroughs, methodologies that increase productivity, and new and creative means of theatrical expression. Innovation can make our daily lives easier and our lifetimes longer. No state, country, or people have a monopoly on innovation, but certain geographies and cultures seem better at fostering its existence. Over the course of our show, we will examine innovation wherever it may exist, both in the private and public sectors. We will explore the problems that challenge innovators, the solutions they have developed, and the results they have achieved. On our program today, we are going to explore the role of education on innovation. STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and math, is a popular method for developing the next generation of students who have an understanding of and ability to use technology. Our two guests today will share their insights on the role of the arts within a STEM education, a STEAM curriculum, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. The STEAM approach emphasizes arts-based creativity as a part of the process of inventing and solving technical issues. Notwithstanding consistent demands on limited financial resources, many educators view courses such as design, music, performance, dance, and sculpture as necessary components to motivating and nurturing creativity and technology. Our guests today are from Cogswell College and Silver Oak Charter High School to talk about their STEAM-based programs. Our first guest is Dr. Timothy Duncan. Dr. Duncan is the Director of Digital Audio Technology at Cogswell College. Welcome, Dr. Duncan. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Chris.
Now, your school has a focus on computer and technology, but has also been offering an arts program since, I believe, 1989.
Yes.
Could you explain some of the ideas behind the school slogan, the fusion of arts and engineering?
In 1989, or the late 80s, we began to realize that the industry in the Bay Area was changing, and this is the point at which computer graphics in the form of animation, this is the genesis of companies like Pacific Data Images, for example. They were starting to form, new careers were starting to be created and that sort of thing in the animation field. And we thought that that would be a promising area. What we were seeing from our own experience with computer science, with software engineering, electrical engineering, is that the demand was actually falling somewhat among students, and so we saw this as a growth area for our college to pursue. And so we did. We adopted first a computer graphics or animation, 3D modeling type of program in 1989. In 1990, we also added to that a digital audio program. At that time, it was called Music Engineering Technology. And the purpose of that was to basically prepare students to be builders or creators of the new music technology that was becoming so very popular in the music industry.
And the science aspect of those courses, those programs, also have an arts component. So what is the arts component for those different programs?
Well, the arts component for the computer graphics program is that we have major concentrations in animation, in 3D animation specifically, 3D modeling, in entertainment design, in technical direction. So, well, the technical direction, I suppose, is more on the technical side, but the point of it is that in essence, the students going through those programs are learning to be artists, but using computer technology. We also developed a game development, game design program, so that's the art side of that. But each of one of these majors also has some sort of corresponding technical equivalent, either from our engineering program or, for example, in the case of computer graphics, we have a technical director focus as well. So in the case of game design, we also have a game engineering. In the case of audio technology, we have production on the one side, and we have audio engineering on the other side.
Now, I know from your background as being both a composer and an award-winning composer,
Thank you.
and also a programmer, you've seen the benefits of combining the two. So this is something that you've seen for many years, correct?
Yes.
And how do you take your background and apply it to the way you guide your students?
Well, in the case of audio students, what I see is that all of the audio technology that we work with, that the students are learning how to use, learning how to be creative with, it's driven by math, it's driven by programming design concerns and so on, concepts, and it's my belief that our students are better creators. They're more competitive in the industry if they have some actual understanding of how the technology works. And so even though we have in one part of the program, we have students who are focusing on being designers and developers of new audio technology, we also have the other part where the students are the users, the creators with that. And it's that sort of, if we talk about the fusion of art and technology, it's that crossroads between the innovation of new technology and the ways that it'll be used that seem to be most interesting.
So if I was to take the course of progress in computer graphics, would
Sure.
I have a course in class in sculpture or design or drawing?
Absolutely. In point of fact, our program, part of its special, I think, appeal is that it very much promotes foundations. So students come in learning 2D graphic design, they learn painting, sculpture, drawing, before they ever really get to working on animation. And so they have these fundamentals, and then that carries them through very strongly in terms of being effective creators using the technology.
There's been an emphasis on the STEM approach.
Sure.
The need to have more technically oriented students entering the workforce.
Yes.
I'm sure that puts pressure on Cogswell to try to address the return on investment that the students have in going to school. What type of pushback do you have in terms of making sure that the arts are well represented in the coursework?
I don't think we have a problem there because the look, the feel of the school is that it's an arts school. And the students get plenty of courses in whatever their major is having to do with the art side of things. I think the pushback comes where students may come in thinking, well, I'm an artist, I don't really need to learn all these technical things. But for us, that's part of a balanced diet. And we feel that our students are stronger as graduates going into the industry with that background. So we ensure that's part of what they get as well.
What type of interaction have you seen with industry in either accepting or being ambivalent towards that approach?
Well, from my own experience as the director of the audio program, I have experienced many times employers saying, we really like Cogswell students, as interns or Cogswell graduates as employees, because they do have that strength of both the technical background and the creative background. The other thing is that collaboration, interdisciplinary collaborative projects are sort of at the front and center of what Cogswell does. And so when students graduate, they leave, they enter industry, they've already been working on teams with other types of specialists, and they know what that collaborative process is. They have a certain flexibility or mobility in that they're able to sort of move in and assume different roles and that sort of thing. So the collaborative part is really something that gives, I think, Cogswell students and graduates an edge.
So rather than a left brain, right brain, it's more of a bicameral approach.
Yes, or another way of saying this is that if we look at innovation and technology, certainly innovation and technology are critical. They're necessary, but they're not necessarily sufficient. That there has to be some sort of creative drive that impels the motivation. And so what we're trying to do is to find some sort of balance, between technological innovation and creative innovation as well. In many cases, I think that we can see the life or death of a new product depends on, in many cases, for example, the content that's available for it. So having the ability to sort of move into a new technological context, to develop content for that, and to make that new technology come alive, again, that's sort of at the center of the fusion of art and engineering.
So if you have an engineering student who's
Sure.
interested in taking some arts classes,
Right.
perhaps to gain the better appreciation of computer graphics, and you have an art student that is being told that they need to learn some of the STEM type courses,
Sure.
where do you see more resistance?
Oh, I think it's individual. It's hard to make generalizations because we get artists who are just excellent. They're really killers at, say, programming or some of the math courses. We get engineers who are really excellent from the art side, and then other students don't follow that at all. They don't compare. In other words, we get people, some students who are very narrow, some students who are very broad, some students who work very easily across the divide, if you will, others who don't. It's hard to make a generalization.
The school has a certification program in virtual reality.
It does.
Sounds like a very interesting area. I know it's very topical. Could you just kind of walk through that process and talk about the types of courses that are involved to highlight or illustrate the STEM and then the arts aspect?
Virtual reality is a very interesting case because I think that it demonstrates very clearly the need to have a sort of a strong technological understanding in order to effectively create content. Virtual reality is it's challenging, it's exciting because there's so many things about that space we still don't really know yet. In talking with virtual reality experts, people who are producing either technology or content in the field, they'll often say there are no best practices yet. So I think that the best preparation for that is to be able to understand as much about what the new technology is, to be able to see what it offers, and then to be able to go into that space and do something with it. So the first part of this certificate program really is about what is virtual reality, or actually we're doing augmented reality as well. And so we're saying, okay, what is in these spaces? What is different about them from other types of immersive experiences, and what are the limitations that someone who's creating content has to work with? For example, motion sickness is a rather common problem in developing new content for virtual reality, and so this is something that content creators have to understand. What are the causes of that sickness? What are the things that a creator needs to do in order to keep someone who's experiencing the technology from getting sick?
Can't they just use the patch?
It hasn't been invented yet.
Yeah, okay.
So.
Use a virtual patch.
Perhaps.
So the augmented reality, that would be, for example, Google Glass?
Yes.
Okay, and do you see an intersection coming up between augmented reality and virtual reality?
When we talk with VR people and with AR people, it's sort of like we're talking to people from different sides of the globe. And it's not very often that we find people who are equally conversant in both. And they tend to regard each other as being somewhat undeveloped or underdeveloped, okay? We'll hear from the VR people, well, AR is not, it hasn't quite arrived yet. You know, its time is to come. And the AR people will say, VR is not quite here yet. It's, you know, it will have its place in due time. They, you know, they're different experiences.
I think we're going to have to
Okay.
cut you off because
Sure.
we're running out of time.
Sure.
Because this is something that we should have you on for another show. It's
I would
very
be happy to
interesting.
do that, yes.
Dr. Duncan, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Our second guest, Steve Gale, is one of the founders of the Silver Oak Chartered Public High School in Hayward. That school was opened under the premise and a plan to follow the STEAM structure at an earlier point in the educational cycle. Welcome to our show, Steve. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Chris. It's a delight to be here.
Now, many schools, many high schools in particular, under the financial pressure of educators seeking to have more emphasis on STEM-based courses, have been cutting arts programs and implementing more standardized programs and testing. What are your views? Because I know that Silver Oak holds itself out as focusing on STEAM. What are your views on the pressures that are coming to bear on schools to focus more on science, technology, engineering, and math to the exclusion of arts?
I think that they're overlooking a tremendous cost savings and a tremendous benefit to the students by excluding art. Art is something that cuts across all cultures, and it's a way for cultures to learn about each other. One of the things that we find particularly in the Bay Area is we have many different cultures here, and especially we have English as a second language, English language learners, and so forth. Yet art can cut across much of that because there are many ways to look at things. People learn in a different fashion, and that's one of the reasons why we're doing things with the Montessori school, because you let the child lead. You let the child go forward, and that way the instructor is able to focus individual attention upon that learner and be able to tailor it to that learner. Now, I realize that's a little bit different than what is going on in a lot of places right now. And this is just a philosophy. This is just a way of doing things that we chose. Now, one of the things that is again, the English language learner. Say, for instance, you have a word problem. How do you translate that effectively? How do you get that over? Yet art allows you to give some of that information in a visual medium. So it's not just auditory, it's not just visual, it's not just kinesthetic. You can use all those different ways of approaching the problem and being able to communicate with the student that way. And that's the effective first thing to do. Get the student interested and engaged by being able to communicate with them, and then find a way to make a bridge from where they're at, where they're thinking, what their life experience is, and what knowledge they have, that they can build on, and then go forward and learn other items, especially when they're interested.
So in a Montessori-based curriculum, especially at the high school level, how is that approach to the arts different from a course in a regular or standard public high school?
Well, there are some differences. We have a digital media lab, for instance, and that's an integral part of our academics. It's a requirement because we want them to be able to incorporate that into how they're learning, and that's something that they can use as a common grounds for communication. And the reason why the common grounds for communication is so important is because Montessori is based upon collaborative learning. So yes, you're focusing on the individual, and there's individuation, but there's also collaborative learning, and that's a very big part of the academics. Learn how to do things in a collaborative fashion, because that is what the real world is. That's what you're going to be expected to do in business or college or any pursuit that you follow, anywhere you go. Now, at the same time, what we have right now in this time in history, in innovation, is we have the ability where many of us were raised with mainframes and terminals, and of course the PC became ubiquitous, and now they have the ability to do everything from not broadcasting themselves, but webcasting themselves, and creating their own content and doing many things with a relatively low-cost platform. So they can go forward with that. And one of the things to do with this is Again, how do we cut across the language barriers? How do we make sure that everybody has that opportunity? And what do you get when you mix all the different cultures? Just as you did with the Silk Road, with trade and merchants and so forth. You come up with new and unique and amazing things. Paper comes from China to Europe.
So you have a program with many different stakeholders. You have the parents, you have the students, you have industry that the students are looking to eventually go out to. You have the universities that are evaluating students as they come out. How do you balance the different needs? And if you can touch on some of those different areas, universities, how they view the students, industry, how they view the programs?
That's a very good question, Chris, because this is a program and a process that's in evolution. We'd love to interact more with industry. We are interacting with the universities, and we are seeing different approaches. For instance, my alma mater, UC Berkeley, I was in love with the idea of my children going to technology, going to physics, going to math, going to engineering. They have no interest in that whatsoever. But if I can get them interested in the physics by showing you want to do animation at, say, an academy, if you want to do animation, you need to understand the physics of how the objects behave to be able to do this in a realistic manner. So it's like, I guess I do need to do that. I guess you do. So learn some physics.
And what would be some of the arts courses? Would it be sculpture or dance?
We are going to be putting in drama. Is our first item that we're putting in there. Drama and acting and so forth. And then we will add other items as we can. Music is an integral part that we're going to be adding in, and is a starting school. We don't have a lot of funds. We don't have a lot of the resources that a lot of the older schools have. So we are, of course, reaching out to our parent community and reaching out to other resources, such as some of the community centers have recording studios. Some of the other areas have music instruments for rent. Either items that we can do. For instance, a science lab. We don't have a science lab that's been built. We have to build it ourselves. We have to stock it with items that we can get from third parties, and that we may be able to rent the scientific equipment rather than purchase it out. So we're making do with things on a shoestring, and this is actually one of the big items to teach the students. You don't always get everything you need to start with. So start with what you've got, and then go forward from there, because in the technology industry, as we're all familiar with, they didn't have this when they started out. They were making it up as they went along. And whether it's synchronicity or serendipity, they made some amazing discoveries along the way. And that's sort of what we're looking for. Make some amazing discoveries of your own. They may not be as earth-shaking as the E-squared prom or something like that, but they will be of interest to you and keep you engaged in this. And that's the key thing. Keep the student engaged in learning so that they don't become disinterested in the education.
So technology companies have gained a reputation in Silicon Valley for not being as giving to charitable organizations as more established businesses. What role does technology companies have in supporting the development of arts in the schools, in particular schools like Silver Oak? What role do they have, and what responsibility do they have?
I'd like to say that they have some enlightened self-interest here, because one thing that you can see is that technology developments and new and interesting ways of looking at things don't always come from the hub. Sometimes they come from the rim. Sometimes they come from the outlying areas. Now, in Silicon Valley, since I haven't lived there for some time, in Silicon Valley, they're more resource rich. They have, obviously, a lot of the engineers, a lot of the outfits are there, right there, where they can concentrate on the students in a lot of the cities that are close to Silicon Valley, or that are right in the area of Silicon Valley. As you look outside that area, as you look in Oakland, Hayward, for instance, where we are, San Rafael, other areas, you might find that the students are used to doing more with less, and therefore they're going to have to use cleverness to be able to get there. Now, if you look at a lot of the technologies that have come up, or a lot of the technologies that have arrived in the last couple of years, they're coming from the students that are in colleges. So take it one step back. Go to the high schools, because a lot of the genesis for those ideas is right there in the high school. Now, you don't want the industries, obviously, to be where they're taking the kids right out of high school. You want them to get the higher education that's available from a university. But I also believe that the university sees a value in, here is a student that has some unique ideas and some different ways of thinking about things. They could be a real addition to our student body. And along the way, they may be the next Larry Ellison, Steve Jobs.
The STEAM-based approach, which has been around for a while but has taken a beating, if you will, in favor of STEM-based approach, do you see the legislature in California looking at that when they're looking at school funding, at different aspects of the way in which schools are regulated at the state level?
I think they do, because I was a technologist also, and I embraced art because my wife is an artist, and I learned about art from my wife. We had both collected art, and she had come from an artistic family, but I was just on the outer edges of art. I didn't know anything about how it was done. It's just, that's a pretty picture, I like that. So along the way I learned, here's how she did things, and I also learned that she could make a living, a very good living, doing art in favor of what her usual job was in finance. And that's fine. Find a job and do what you love, and you will never have to work a day in your life. So my wife is very busy, but it's not work. It's what she loves doing, and she gets compensated very well for it. So with her company, Star Arts, she was able to do that and grow it and actually work with university students, as well as we were able to have our kids involved in it. So they're able to do things too. So now my daughters are looking beyond the usual sort of boundaries that might have been put upon them in a traditional environment, so that they can say, I can make a living doing art. I can do this. I can be this. I can see all of my mom's art friends that make a living doing this as well. And I learned something new from that as well. For instance, in technology and semiconductors, chemical vapor deposition and annealing and all that boring stuff that my kids go, don't want to hear it. But when they say, hey, you could use that with jewelry. Oh, that's true. You can use all these different technologies and techniques in things that are not related to it immediately. Just as, for instance, they irradiate diamonds to give them sparkle and color. You learn a different way to do things. And that's where art comes in here. Art can create a whole new way of thinking about something. For instance, when my wife takes my tools and uses them for ways that I never ever intended her to use them, because I just wasn't using them, because I don't do much of that anymore, she comes up with new and unique ways of doing things.
And as you go forward with Silver Oak, as it implements these programs, where does it see these programs in 5 and 10 years?
In the next 5 years, we're going to try to fully flesh out where we're at. Obviously, we're going to be reaching out to industry and the community, and the parents are a very big part of that, and the communities are a very big part of that. We would love to reach out to the Silicon Valley area as well. And again, as I say, it's enlightened self-interest, because what's happening on the far rim of technology in areas that don't have a lot of the funding, that don't have a lot of these things, they learn to do more with less, how to do unique and interesting things. And along the way, they introduce a little bit of style and panache as well. So for instance, as we saw with Apple, with the iPod, okay, industrial design became a very big part of the selling part of that product. And it became very popular, where before in other areas, they were all trying to make the same looking thing.
The utilitarian approach.
I beg your pardon?
The utilitarian approach.
Exactly. I worked in the PC industry for a while, so I was used to make the same box that everybody else has. Oh, well, how about this? So this guy over here is going to make it with a granite finish. Oh, that's really cool, but nobody will buy it.
And that was innovative for the time.
That was innovative back in the 80s. But now, what are you looking for? Well, how about something that works ergonomically and that's comfortable? Something that works.
We're running out of time, so I'm going to have to cut you off. This is a fascinating discussion I'd like to continue at another time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Chris. I could talk about this all day, but you won't like it.
Okay. Thank you for joining us today on Global Innovation. If you, your organization or company, is interested in appearing on our show to talk about your innovative concepts or ideas, please visit us on our website at roadwayintel.com. I am your host, Chris Graham. Thank you.